And we're live. What's up, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of Off the Mats podcast. And it's Dante. My guest today on the podcast, I would like to welcome Mr. David Riedman. And David is a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu practitioner, and also he is the creator of the K through 12 school shooting database. And I want to talk with David really about jiu-jitsu, and we want to talk about sport jiu-jitsu versus practical use jiu-jitsu and self-defense jiu-jitsu, but also just kind of run the whole gauntlet of conversations. So David, for you with your jiu-jitsu journey, where did that start? Like, what got you into training Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that on a flight last week because I knew that was going to be a question that you were going to ask. And it's kind of random. It all started on a flight about actually 16 years ago this month. It would have been January 2009 is when I first got started. But it actually started before then in a way that I didn't even know. So my brother is 4 years younger. And when I was in college, you're not paying attention to what your kid brother's doing anymore. But when he was in 11th grade, he randomly got into jiu-jitsu. And he did really well because when he was a senior in high school, he ended up getting his blue belt at Yamasaki Academy in Rockville. But he's my kid brother in high school, so I'm not really paying attention to it at all. But at some point over that time, I had an iPod video. I'm sure you remember one of those. You probably have one of those.
Still
And
using mine.
I had downloaded all of his iTunes library onto it because he had a ton of music. So now fast forward to 2009, I'm on a red eye flight back from Honolulu. And that's a long flight back to DC. It's like an 11-hour flight. So I thought I was going to sleep through it, but about halfway through, I couldn't sleep. I'm scrolling through the iPod and I see that there's a video on there. And it's like a 2-hour video. So I click on it and it's Choke. It's the iconic jiu-jitsu movie Choke. And I've got like 6 more hours in the flight. So I'm watching it on that little 2x2 screen on the iPod video, and my mind is just blown. I'm like, what is going on with this? This is like the most inspirational, most empowering video I've ever watched. How do I not know anything about this? Why did my brother have this in his iTunes library? I don't even know. So I watched that like 3 times in a row. So I had 6 hours to watch on the flight, and I just like couldn't get enough of it. So I got back, and it's right after New Year's 2009. I've been doing the Washington Sports Club thing for a while, but I would make myself go lift weights, but I wasn't really interested in it. So I look up on the map Yamasaki Academy, and it happens to be like a half mile from my office in Rockville. So just kind of, I'm like, I watched this Choke documentary. I'm into this. I'm going to go in, do a class, see what it's all about. And from there, I was kind of hooked after the first day.
Nice. Did you play any sports or anything like growing up prior? Did you, because sometimes you get folks that come in and they'll have that previous athletic background, and it's kind of like, okay, this is a lot different. And then you have folks who come in who know nothing, but then jiu-jitsu becomes that thing for them.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of things. My sport, which Montgomery County in Maryland is a hotbed of, was swimming. Since I was 5 or 6 years old, I was competitive swimming year round. I did that through high school. Like I could have gone on a college scholarship swimming, but I was just really burned out on it at that point. But I had really good breathing control. I had really good endurance, pretty long frames. So that lent itself really well to swimming. And then I was also a volunteer in the fire department in Maryland, which is, Montgomery County is one of the largest or the largest combination career volunteer fire department in the country. So from, being 16 all the way, through my 30s when I moved away from Maryland, you're doing a lot of really physical stuff in the fire department. You're dragging stuff, you're breaking doors, you're dragging ladders around, you're carrying tools around. So I had kind of the base of good endurance and kind of the swimming is a really mental game. It's more a mental game, I think, than any other sport. And then I also felt really comfortable kind of throwing and moving heavy objects around. So I think jujitsu just was something that felt right and clicked immediately. But there are parallels. People don't realize it, but the air tank that you carry in the fire department doesn't have a lot of air in it. So every one of the breaths that you're taking might be the breath that you need to get out. So even though you're doing really intense activity and your adrenaline's rushing and you're, operating in a house fire in a dangerous condition, the entire time you need to be thinking about your breathing and conserving your air and conserving your energy. And that plays so well into jujitsu. Swimming is exactly the same way, where you're in a constant fight because every time you're taking a breath, you're losing that moment of efficiency in your stroke. And so you're constantly fighting against that urge to breathe because you don't actually need to breathe as much as you think you do.
Huh. I never even thought of it that way either. I know that's one of the big things at least I try to focus on the mats is, my breath control and I end up in a lot of bad positions. And that breath control is very important, to keep you from panicking and stuff like that. I mean, been doing it long enough now where I'm not necessarily in a panic, but still, you get in a triangle and you got to be calm and escape from that. Also, I have a short, stubby neck, so yeah, that helps a little bit. But the breath control, never even thought, especially when you connect it to swimming, because having the long frame and then having that swimming background and the breath control there. I mean, you're almost kind of custom built for jujitsu, really, at that point.
Yeah, I've been really lucky because I think, listening to your podcast, listening to some other jujitsu podcasts, a lot of people come into it later in life, or a lot of people use it as a way to get in shape. And I was just so fortunate to be 23, find a world class academy that's one of the oldest ones in the country, be half a mile from my house.
I know one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about was like uh sport jiu-jitsu, or I guess, yeah, sports jiu-jitsu versus like the practical use of jiu-jitsu and grappling in a self-defense type scenario. So um how does that vary from where you're standing between the two?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to who you train with and what their mentality is and what they want to get out of it. Because what really kind of changed my outlook on jujitsu in the last couple of years is one of my buddies here in Orlando. He was the SWAT commander for one of the local police departments. He's a black belt. He had some MMA fights, but he's like me. I'm 39. He's early 40s. So we're kind of in that taking it easier range. But in the taking it easier, he wants to always be focusing on every position is applicable to MMA, no gi jiu-jitsu. Every single position is something that you're keeping yourself safe if somebody's fighting. Every single thing is giving you, multiple options to go different directions. And I think that like that, what kind of drives me crazy about sport jiu-jitsu is how artificial a lot of the parts of it are. Like, yeah, you go to this guard. If somebody wants to punch you, like they're gonna turn your face into a hamburger. Like, if you dive for this deep half, like somebody is gonna absolutely pummel you. Thinking about your hands, thinking about where you're gonna throw, thinking about where you're positioning your body, and those things actually translate really, really well to keeping yourself safe in regular jujitsu.
Cool.
But back to like what we're saying about sport versus self defense or MMA jiu-jitsu is you would always have a hand up by your face. You're always thinking about blocking. You're always thinking about a kick. You're always thinking about a punch coming in. And if you're in that in every position, it completely changes the way that you're thinking about the way that you frame, the way that you position yourself. the way that maybe it's an elbow that's making space and your hands connected to your forehead rather than pushing out, with a straight frame. And so just that change in mentality, if you're always thinking in every setting, I've got to protect myself from a punch, then all of your body position is going to be different. And that can help you avoid injury, I think, in a lot of situations.
I think when Eddie Bravo introduced combat jiu-jitsu, that started opening up a lot of folks' eyes as well. And that was an interesting way to kind of change the sports jiu-jitsu landscape a little bit, because you got to factor in for getting hit. If you're trying to, set something up, from the bottom, if you're trying to set something up from your guard, and then somebody's raining shots down on you, that's real life. If you're in the street, if you're in a street fight and you pull guard, I think you've already made a drastic mistake already.
Oh, yeah, that's not going to end well. But
You
it's
probably
also,
shouldn't be there.
yeah, but the things should all be a cohesive system that kind of come together. Because I mean, takedowns are hard. Takedowns, if there are two people who are both doing, strictly gi jujitsu, and you both know how to defend, you both know how to sprawl, you both know how to break grips, like getting a takedown is really hard. But if I throw a right at you and make you duck and come up, but that's a feint, and I'm actually going to shoot a shot, then that's something where like you have an element where things connect together. Um, Not that I'm any good at that either, but
There's so many different outcomes, whether it be, you know, they've got a weapon, whether, they themselves know how to at least wrestle and get you to the ground now. What if you're the kind of fighter that's like, oh well, I'm so used to stalling. Like, I've got my points and I'm just gonna hang out here. And like, no, they're gonna start punching you in the face a whole lot and you're probably going to go out.
yeah, training with a prop weapon, I think, is also like one of the most useful things that you can do in jujitsu, because aside from being something that's really functional, it makes you completely rethink your game. Like when all of a sudden, I published an article a couple weeks ago on Substack around just some basic drills that you can do with a gun, where you have a loose gun, you have one partner has the gun in their belt, they're trying to defend it, the other person's trying to take it away. You go back and forth on rounds like that, and the first couple rounds, the only thing that you're going to be thinking about is that gun, and you're going to forget everything you know about jujitsu, because suddenly it's, oh, I've got to have two hands on this, I've got to have one hand on this, I've got to be controlling, and you forget everything that you know about spacing and position and control in different points and passing. It just all goes out. So every time you can introduce or play with something that makes you kind of work back through your original principles, it's going to start sharpening all those parts of your game, and it's going to, like, it deals with the monotony of it too. Like it can, jujitsu is fun, but like it's, if you do it a lot and you do it with the same people, the fun level, flattens out at some point. So I think you've always got to come up with ways to to keep challenging yourself, to keep like thinking of ways to make the training like fun and engaging again. And I mean that kind of comes to what you introed at the start. Is my main area of research is, it's really dark and depressing, but it's school shootings. I've been studying that for 7 years now, trying to understand everything possible about who, what, where, when, and why of school shootings. But where this kind of connects to this conversation, and what I had reached out to you about initially, is there's this thought that let's just put more armed people into schools, and if there are more armed people, then you can kill somebody. If a shooting starts, the reality is the shootings are really rare. But now what you have is lots of armed people in all of these spaces, where in schools every day there are fights. In schools every day there are kids that are having disciplinary issues, mental health issues, suicide crisis, behavioral problems, tons of special education kids around the country. If all of a sudden you have people that have guns, but they don't have any training. They have never done jujitsu. They've never done any martial arts. They have no sense of body control. They have no sense of body position. They don't know anything about how to defend a deadly weapon that they're carrying. We're actually going to create a much more dangerous situation for students than we ever had before.
I absolutely agree with that. I've always wondered, when that started coming up, it's like, let's arm the teachers. Okay. Are those teachers trained in any way, not just with a weapon? Because sure, you can know how to shoot, but like you said, if a scuffle breaks out. I have a friend who's a teacher up in the Bronx, and he had, like, when this topic started coming up, he had explained a situation of, like, they all have walkie talkies there, and one of the teachers in the chaos, the student got a hold of the walkie talkie, and he was like, now put a gun in that situation. You have to have, there's so much that goes into it. When you uh you know started thinking about, kind of connecting the two, the practical use of self-defense in jiu-jitsu and training and everything, you know did that kind of lead you to, um the K through 12?
Most of my professional life has been in homeland security, emergency management, kind of major disaster response. And then I was at a program that was like a think tank of people from across different homeland security disciplines who were thinking about what are all of the issues that the country is going to face in the next generation, the next 10 years. And in the midst of this program, the Parkland shooting happened. And that was a time where I realized I had been in this homeland security space for more than a decade, and we never talked about school shootings as a homeland security issue. So I just wanted to know everything about that topic, because before 2018, you couldn't definitively say, were there more shootings this year than last year? Were the characteristics of them changing? The characteristics of the perpetrators changing? Are the tactics changing? All of these basic who, what, where, when, and why that you would want to know about any crime, about any social problem, there wasn't any data that existed on that. So all of the policy decisions that were being made, all of the security funding that was going into fortifying schools and so on, was just being based on people's guesses. There was absolutely no kind of objective information about that. And then as I've been working on that for the last 7 years now, it starts to connect in other places. So it's really been in the last 2 or 3 years that there's been this push to arm more teachers in schools. That really ramped up in the last year. And so I've been trying to think about ways to connect with more people to talk about that we need to think about these problems more than on the surface. If you're a really linear, simple thinker, it's there's a school shooter, give the closest adult a gun, closest adult kills school shooter, problem solved. But that's not the way that complex problems work. You have all of these different dimensions. So I want people to really be thinking about what's risk, what is either increasing or decreasing the risk for a student any given day, any given place, with any of these situations within a school. And then I have my own podcast where I talk exclusively about this topic, but I've had teachers and school administrators and school police officers and so on the podcast talking about how they just get thrown into situations that people haven't thought about all of the consequences that come from that. So with this piece on armed teachers, is we in general need to think about all the responsibility that goes into carrying a gun. You have to be able to defend it. You have to be able to keep track of it. You need to be able to use it effectively in a highly chaotic situation where you're not able to see straight. And if you don't put intense time and effort into each one of those steps, then you're probably going to be in a situation that is far worse than if you didn't have that gun at all. So I just want to kind of bring some sense to this, because that a teacher who's just handed a gun and goes to, an 8-hour training session, that's like a first day white belt. And you don't want a first day white belt in a classroom full of kids when there's a bang in the hallway. It is not going to turn out well for anybody. And people within the jiu-jitsu community understand how much time, how much effort, how much dedication it takes to be able to slow situations down, to be able to learn how to control yourself in high adrenaline, intense situations, to learn how to control and defend your body against other people. And I think the people making policies don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I always feel like there are people that are making decisions, or not even necessarily making, but like looking at it and have a hand in the decision that don't quite, they're not on the ground level. They don't see it from there. They're just looking at make the problem go away. It's like, well, what's your suggestion for making the problem go away might make the problem bigger. Like, we got to attack it from the ground. Um, in even thinking about, the ideal of arming teachers, in my mind, I'm always wondering, is like, well, you know, who all gets a gun? What teachers get a gun? You know, um, it's just, like the protection of the gun in the classroom or wherever it may be. How guarded is that? You know, it's in. I don't know. I also feel like too, kids are observant of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they catch on. They find out, oh, there's a gun in my classroom. My teacher has access to that gun. You know, or at least it's nearby. There's just all these little things that I think about. It's like, because I know
Oh,
the
kids
school.
kids know the school better than any adult. I
Yeah.
mean, I still think I know my high school probably better than any of the teachers there did. We knew every spot in that building. We knew every
Mhm.
way in and out of that building. There was nothing that was going to stop us from getting anywhere. Well, what we've done is we've taken a lot of agency away from the students, and I mean, this is another thing that it's not going to happen, but it would be great if it did. If every school had a jujitsu program, you wouldn't have a lot of these problems to start with. You wouldn't have the bullying, you wouldn't have the conflicts, you wouldn't have a lot of the interpersonal issues, not just for students, but for staff also. You know, most school staff members, if they were training on a regular basis, if they were confident in themselves, if they were confident in their ability to communicate, to project strength, to be assertive, they wouldn't want to have a gun. Or maybe they would feel inclined to talk to and engage with that student that they're scared of, before you'd ever get to the points of conflict. So I think that what we've done is we've taken, again, these very linear, here's one problem, here's one solution, we can make a line from A to B, we're just going to do that because it's simple. But when you've got complicated problems that involve lots of people in lots of spaces in different circumstances, the ways to solve those problems are going to be complicated, time consuming, unconventional solutions. And that's like, what was it with like Snoop Dogg and those guys where they locked all the Bloods and Crips in the gym, overnight, and you're going to play basketball to work out the issues. Like we've just forgotten some of the simplest stuff. Like jiu-jitsu was created to equalize street fights in Sao Paulo 100 years ago. Let's not take things to escalate violence, to escalate deadly situations. Let's go back to some basics that might help people.
Yeah, definitely. I've always thought about, my wife homeschools our daughter. And, when we talk about PE, we talk about PE a lot, actually. It's like, it's just one of those things that it seems like, any kind of physical movement in school, period. You get recess, for 30 minutes. This is like elementary up to middle, I guess. And then you get PE for a semester, maybe. So there's not a lot of movement. And I've brought up the idea just in conversation talking with her. I was like, I think they should have like something with jujitsu and not watered down, because how it gets in the schools. It's like, all right, we're just gonna kind of breeze through this because we know half of you don't want to do this, so we're just gonna just bear with us, and let me get my work done, and then the kids end up learning nothing, and that's super unfortunate. I was in middle school in Delaware, and I remember we had a chapter on wrestling. I guess our PE coach, or they might have had a wrestling coach actually come in, because we spent a lot of time on that. And just thinking about that, it's like if you have something with jujitsu like that for the students, somebody that's doing it and cares and actually wants to get this accomplished, because you know if the students are doing well with it and look good, and it reflects great on the teacher,
Yeah.
versus they go out there and they look like shit and they don't want to do it.
Yeah, people are doing that in a small scale, but it's just
Hmm.
not institutionalized. Like think of Carlos Riba with Guardian in Baltimore.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a gym where we're going to have kids and we're going to get them into this environment. They can be on scholarships, so they're not going to have to pay for it. And when they're in an after school program where they're going to have a study hall, they're going to have a meal, they're going to have training, they're going to have structure, they're going to interact with adults. Those kids are probably not going to be out causing problems like ever in their lives because they're given the structure and way to do it. Unfortunately, like I said, this would be a great thing to happen, for every student and every teacher and every staff member to be, training would probably solve a whole lot of our problems, but it's not going to happen. Like, so unfortunately, that's why this won't happen. This is a brutal sport. I mean, I've had 3 different injuries that I've missed almost a year from. Um, we know concussions are bad. That you end up with a lot of that in jiu-jitsu just from bad luck over time. Like our parents, our school administrators, are the lawyers going to let this happen? Probably not, but we can still dream and say like there are better ways. There's probably a better solution than giving a teacher a gun for the purpose of killing a kid. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
harsh reality of it. So
Yes.
if we can go to that extreme, like maybe we can try out the other extreme of having everybody sweat a little bit and wrestle each day.
I mean, I think that's a point though that you brought up too, is like the lawyers, because that's with jujitsu, you got to sign this waiver, just in case. You never know. But that's always the hiccup in the road, is like, oh, well, we got to now draft out all the possible things that could go wrong, and if there's like even one, they're like, well, we shouldn't do this. I feel like though there is a way to teach this, and especially if you start up younger too. Because I had a friend on here who's a state trooper, and we talked about uh, police officers learning jujitsu, and it's like, well, if you start it now with the new recruits, you got the folks that are already in there. Sure, they're where they are. If they want to come back and learn jujitsu, so that way they're safer on the streets, awesome. But everyone else coming in now, you have to learn it. And, maybe if, from those earlier ages, okay, this is what we're doing. And then as you go up, they've already kind of got it instilled. You go to the next level, and now you're learning the next level of things still safely. Yes, there are injuries that can occur, but, again, you know, taking your time getting to there. There's got to be a way. It's just there's
Yeah,
always that hiccup of like,
there's some good peer reviewed research out there on police officers and formal BJJ training that they have a lower rate of times when they pulled their service weapon. They have a lower rate of citizen complaints for use of force, and they have a lower rate of both officer and citizen injury. And I mean, when you think about it, it gets overlooked in the cost. But if police arrest someone, they don't know what they're doing. Somebody gets shot, somebody gets beaten down. It's the taxpayers that are going to pay, a couple $100,000 or $1 million settlement for this. It's the same way with the school. Somebody gets shot in the school, there's going to be a multi-million-dollar settlement. whether it's an accident, whether it's intentional, whether it's a planned attack, whether it's a domestic that happened, in the drop off line of the school. Like there are going to be some $1 million settlements out of this. So what we need to think about is ways to take some unconventional approaches, some approaches that are really low cost, and say like what we're doing is not working. What we're doing is not creating a better school environment. So can we take a risk on trying something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just the thing. Like you said, the risk. Everything's a risk. So like, let's look for the risk that's going to keep everyone safe, as safe as possible, at least, because there is a limit. Um, I also think too, when the conversation first started about arming the teachers, someone had brought up, what if you get that teacher who, they're already not getting paid a lot? Well, you got that one teacher that, you know, snaps.
Yeah,
You
I've
know,
documented about 100 cases over the last 60 years that involve teachers, and they've been wild. There have been teachers that barricaded in their classrooms. There was a teacher who was going to get fired, so he lit the school on fire and then shot himself. There have been domestics between teachers where, especially in small communities, everybody's married to somebody in that. And if somebody's sleeping with somebody else's wife, and they all work at the same school, that can turn into a shooting in a classroom, a shooting in a break room. So just, yeah, I mean, in general, I don't think this should be a political point, but deadly weapons increase the risk to everybody in the area of that deadly weapon. And for kids, it increases the risk even more greatly. I just did an episode of my show with the CEO of Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. He was actually a pediatric trauma surgeon in DC back in the 90s when it was murder capital. And with kids, when your body's even smaller and when your organs have different proportions compared to your body, a gunshot injury is even more likely to be fatal to a child. So we need to be thinking about risk in a lot of different circumstances. And if you have a deadly weapon, there's a risk of somebody getting hurt or killed. And if there's a child in the vicinity of that deadly weapon, there's an even higher risk of that person getting, killed. So I think one of the things about jujitsu is it teaches you respect. It teaches you time. It teaches you that you have to put work into being able to be able to control and beat someone. And if people don't understand that, you think that a gun gives you power. And you think, which is true, a gun gives anyone the power to kill someone else. It gives a 6-year-old kid the power to try to kill his teacher, in Virginia 2 years ago. But if you're getting to that point, it's probably because you've never had the exposure and the discipline to learn what it really takes to master something. What it really takes, it takes every week effort if you want to be out on the mats dominating everybody who's there in the gym. And we've got to find ways to give, I think, not just kids, but adults more exposure to that, because I think that I think a lot of people wouldn't pull the trigger in a stupid situation or wouldn't carry a gun into a stupid situation. Like all these bar fights that turn into a shooting. If you just had a little more respect for yourself, for life, for time, for effort, for discipline, you would never put yourself in a situation where somebody gets killed.
absolutely. Um, I remember back in high school, um, like I was class of '97, so this was a couple years before Columbine, I believe.
Yeah, it was 99.
Um, and but there are always like whispers of like someone shooting up school, coming in with guns into the school. Always whispers. One kid actually, and I think this kind of got a little blown out of proportion. A kid had a lighter in school, and he kept flicking the lighter under the desk. and then the rumors went flying that kid was trying to burn down the school. You have even these situations too where whispers come about, and then there's the growing concern. Yes, if you hear something, you should still, preemptively, approach it, not necessarily like aggressively, not with a weapon or anything, but you still want to talk to the parents, you know, talk to the guidance counselor, talk to, there's so many steps to get there. And actually listening to one of your episodes, I think it was on Freakonomics. You all talking about that. It was just like, if one of the things are done in that long chain, this can all be prevented. And even just, when I think it's like, yeah, like at the very least, the parents take it serious, guidance counselors someone take it serious. Maybe we can avoid getting to the bigger issue, but maybe we're just a long way away from, because there's so many people, so many schools, when you're doing these things on a larger scale, it is tough.
Yeah, I think we don't have to get stuck in these feelings of saying a problem is too big. Like a much bigger problem is fights that are occurring in schools. Like in DC and Baltimore, like if you look at the local news, like there are fights in these schools all the time. And so if kids are going to be fighting anyway in the hallway, why don't you give them an opportunity to fight safely? Why don't you give them an opportunity in the discipline to, if you have to roll with somebody you don't like and you have to do technique with them for half an hour during gym class, is that conflict just going to get squashed right there? And that's where, we need more out of the box thinking, because we've gotten into this situation where we say, because of the Constitution, we can't do anything about guns. Because of lawyers, we can't do anything about somebody potentially getting hurt. Because of the teachers union, we can't do anything with mandating, this extra training the teachers go to. Like, you, at some point, you just have to tear things down to their fundamentals and say, like, okay, we have groups of kids that are fighting on a regular basis. We can't do any of these things to stop it. We can't do anything to stop one of them from bringing a gun to that fight one day, because that's what happens about 300 times a year in a school. Is there's a fight that escalates into a shooting. That's the most common situation. So if you can't do anything about those three factors, why don't we think outside the box? Give these kids a way to fight. Give these kids a situation where they're in close contact with each other. Give you know it. I hate to sound like, I'm trying to be like some sort of jujitsu saves the world prophet, but it really can help people deal with conflicts. It can help people deal with stress, and it can help people deal with tension between groups and peers. And if those things are really the source of why fights or stabbings or shootings or bullying or teenage suicides are happening, then why don't we try something different to address them?
As far as the jiu-jitsu community, and us all as practitioners, and I guess ambassadors, for the art, um what's something that you think that we, as an overall, could do to potentially help somehow, some way in this matter, if there's a way?
I think it would be, first, if you have kids, which I think probably everybody who's deep into jujitsu, if they have kids, like they've got them training. But talk to other parents, talk to other neighbors, just try to tell people about, just the importance of having goals, having discipline, having regular activity, having physical activity. I think there's been a lot that's been written and researched about the lack of touch in our society, and the way that the lack of physical touch makes people feel further and further from other people in society. And the more disconnected you are, the more likely you're going to be able to commit violence against somebody. Like it takes incredible mental effort, and pretty profound trauma and crisis for somebody to kill an intimate partner or to kill a family member or spouse. But when violence is targeting strangers, it's because you don't have respect. The person shooting doesn't have respect for those victims as a person, doesn't feel that they're connected, that they're on the same team in the same place. So, something that happens when you're doing jujitsu, when you're close to people, like you're understanding the humanity of another person, and that's probably similar to basketball has kind of some parallels when you're bumping against people inside fighting for rebounds. Football certainly has that, but those aren't sports that are scalable to everyone kind of throughout their life. But this is something that can be. I mean, I'm almost 40 and I'm going to stay with this for a while, but if you can get just a couple other people to take the journey with you, if you can get a kid who maybe just came out of football, maybe he's at your job, maybe he's at your church, and you can tell that he's kind of lost, and you can say like, hey, there's something that might be right for you right now. um, get some people engaged that are kind of floating at the fringe, and then they're not going to be at the fringe anymore. What there is something different about jiu-jitsu from any of those others, which is being buried in somebody's side control, really having to work your way out of a bad position, feeling knee on belly, and just feeling like their knees touching the mat, and you're just losing air and your diaphragm's crushed. Like there needs to be some of that physical helplessness to build the respect for other people. And I think that that's one of the issues, is that people don't respect somebody because they don't realize how powerful they can be. And if everybody's always at arm's length, or if somebody's looking down a gun barrel instead of rolling with you on the sidewalk, you're never respecting somebody else's power.
Would love to have you back on as a guest. Before we get out of here, are there any shout outs or mentions that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, if anybody wants to find out more about school shootings, warning, it's a really depressing, dark subject, but I write quite a bit about it. You can check out K through 12 school shooting database. If you look it up on Google, it's the first thing that comes out. I have the weekly Back to School Shootings podcast. Almost everybody on the show is either a PhD or a physician, or a kind of high level official who's working in this space. And then I publish articles every week on Substack on school shooting data analysis and reports. And that, if you have a kid in school, if you just want to know what's going on, there's a lot of information there about news, about recent incidents, about trends and data analysis. So yeah, that's all out there, and it's all free.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put the links in the show notes so everybody have a quick direct get to for it, and make sure to tag you as well in the show notes.
For sure. And Dante, thank you so much for being a great ambassador of this sport and having really interesting discussions with people. I just found out about your show recently, but I've listened to a bunch of episodes of it, and I think that you're really doing an important thing to socialize people, to kind of demystify what this sport is, and then to tell the stories of like how many really unique people are doing this for lots of different reasons.